I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Whately Personnel Committee. Our first order of business is to review, discuss, and vote on minutes of previous meetings. Do I have any comments on the minutes from the previous meetings?
I move to accept.
Okay, I'll second. Then we'll go for a roll call vote. All those in favor, Susan,
Aye.
Jim,
Sorry, I lost my screen there for a second. I was looking for the minutes, but I'll go with it.
okay,
vote.
and Joyce, aye. Okay, so the minutes pass. And we have one discussion item, and that is to review and discuss employee performance review process. And so this is a chance for us to hear from, I think mostly from Pete and Jim, from department heads, how they think things went and what kind of things we might do to improve it in the future. We heard a little bit before about how it just kind of didn't work that well for the transfer station attendants. But let's hear from Jim and Pete.
So there is a document in the packet materials that I compiled the feedback and then I also put together, I went and looked at some performance evaluation online systems that are catered to governmental entities. So we can go back first through the feedback. These were just the main points that were kind of discussed. The process may not be efficient. Staff has to evaluate, supervisor has to evaluate, then the two meet with the town administrator. The part-time fire chief pointed out that he had 16 evaluations that he had to do. And so he was curious, like, does that mean that I need to give up training for a month in order to then do my in-person reviews with all of my staff? Remember, they're all on call. So it's just pointing out where, you know, some of the realities of how the departments function made it a little difficult. There was a question of how to make it easier for part-time and very part-time staff. The process can be time-consuming for them given their limited work schedules. Maybe there was a suggested maybe just have a singular meeting at which time the evaluation is completed by employee and supervisor together. So rather than taking time beforehand, just do an evaluation in person. There was also the idea of making the three-party review where it's the employee, the supervisor, and the TA meeting optional, meaning that the employee and the supervisor would independently complete their reviews and they would only meet if one of them wanted to. The other idea was they would do a three-party meeting only if there were deficiencies in the review. So if there were underperforming items that were identified by the employee or supervisor, that would be the only trigger to then require having an in-person meeting with the town administrator. And then there was an idea of making questions more department specific, and also looking at maybe combining some questions, such as combining questions 2 and 7 and maybe even 8. So those were very specific things, but really it kind of came down to procedurally, what is the best way to do it? You know, do they do it independently, multiple? So there's multiple times where you're looking at your review, both when you fill it out, but then also when you do the sit-down meeting, or just do it during a sit-down meeting. Is a sit-down meeting even required? Thinking back to like our fire chief, who is a part-time fire chief, if he has 16 on call, that's a lot of meetings that he has to do on a limited schedule. So those are just some thoughts that were kind of we discussed. We made no decisions. We just wanted to kind of put together what the feedback was so that the personnel committee understood the different dynamics.
In listening to you talk through those, my overall impression is, are there things we can do to make it less onerous? Aside from the comment about combining questions and more department specific, it's not the review, that's not the content people are necessarily doubting or, having issues with, but how time consuming it is. So,
Yeah.
are there steps we can do to address that?
Yeah, I think that is the crux of it. And again, too, when this meeting was department head meeting, so it was department heads who may be a little more sensitive to the fact that they had multiple reviews to do, right? Because they were reviewing their staff as well as themselves. Whereas when it's just the staff just doing their one review, the time commitment is less onerous, I would say. So the dynamic here, we just have to remember we're taking material from people that did have to do multiple reviews.
That's, that's something we need to consider is
Yeah.
not just the individuals, but the department heads. I mean, the first thought that occurs to me, and I keep in mind, I don't have the expertise, especially in the way our departments operate, but could we make the meetings optional that either an employee, so everyone receives their review, a written review, the employee can request a meeting to discuss, and if there are issues in the review, the supervisor can request a meeting. But this way, we're not having meetings with, hey, you're doing great, keep up the good work. I don't know if that would help.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the other things that came up during the meeting was department heads looking at their specific employees and saying if they're not meeting the standard, and I don't know if this is in your notes, Pete, or not, but if they're not meeting the standard, then they would already be addressing those issues with their employees as time's going on. So because the issue came up that the review, your step increase is dependent on a or not a satisfactory review, but a review. I can't remember exactly how it's worded. Pete probably has it, but like exceeding the standard, not just meeting the standard. So they don't technically wouldn't get a step unless they were exceeding the standard. So that was also discussed, just to add another point to it as well. I don't know if you have any additional notes on that part of the discussion, Pete. But.
No.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about the bullet point, make questions more department specific. And I sort of have mixed feelings about that, thinking, well, presumably with every job description, we could have a different set of questions, which would be kind of taking it to an extreme. If we've identified a few places where the current questions are problematic, I mean, they seem to be more or less good questions for people who are full-time, and this is kind of their career, right? So I'd say most of the town office staff and police chief and the folks in the highway department are mostly, and maybe some of them are part-time, but mostly they're, full-time. I mean, could it be that if we identify kind of the places where those questions are just too much, like I keep going back to the transfer station attendants, I would be fine with, the Board of Health saying, here, these are the questions we want. Maybe they have a simple 3 checkbox. I mean, for employees that are working fewer than X hours, then maybe we do something different in terms of what questions we ask. And I think that might be appropriate. I don't know what X is. a transfer station attendant might work 15 hours a week. So so that might not really capture it. I'm trying to think of the places where addressing all of those questions is kind of silly and makes people giggle, and we should definitely think about that. But in lines where it's kind of a professional, then the questions are largely relevant. Like the person taking minutes for the planning board, probably not going to be their profession. So I wonder if there's any usefulness in identifying positions that are not professional and that just might have a simpler, like, are you able to complete your tasks, you know, on time, and like with whatever measure of quality. That could be just a really fast thing. Maybe even the supervisor only fills it out for positions that are like that, where they're really not, where it's not like a full-time professional position, knowing that we also have some positions that are very professional that are not full-time. So anyway, that's where my mind got stuck as we were going through all of these. I do think we could have the three-party meeting be optional, and that either the employee or the supervisor could request it. If they request it, it's no longer optional. If either one requests it, it's no longer optional. That seems actually a reasonable thing to do. Is there another way for, like, the fire chief to do 16 evaluations of people who are on call? I mean, maybe they don't work 5 hours a week. I mean, so hours per week wouldn't necessarily be the cutoff there. Is there something that about the evaluation questions that might be different for folks who are on call? Is there something about the evaluation questions that would be different if you're a part-time police officer, not a full-time police officer? So as I ask like more and more questions, it makes it seem like it's going to the point of, oh, like every job description is going to need a different set of questions. And I don't think we want to go there. That's a little too far. And it would mean that every time we have a new position, we have to figure out what's the appropriate employee evaluation.
I think you bring up a good point that depending on the position classification, they may not need to do a self-evaluation. They just need the supervisor to do a simple evaluation of them, which kind of takes, like the transfer station, for example, like the attendants don't have to self-evaluate. They just need to know from their supervisor, what am I doing well and what do I need to improve on?
Yeah.
Hopefully they're aware.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
the brand's
right.
aware. It's, you do run into those situations where some of them don't always have oversight, but that's more of their own internal that they have to figure out.
Right. But yeah, so maybe there's a way to suggest, if you're saying at some point, the classification starts involving more and more responsibilities and things we associate with being a professional. Is there a reasonable cutoff then where we could just say the supervisor does an evaluation and they can base it off of these questions, but if they want to do it in terms of other questions, then that would be just fine.
I wonder if we use the classification table, and we would say anything of grade X and above. I'm just trying to hold that up. So like maybe anything grade 6 and above, they do need to be okay, well, grade 1 is cemetery sextons, the constables, library associate, and substitute library associate. Level 2 or grade 2 is the admin assistant to the planning, ZBA, ag, and CPC, as well as custodian and library custodian. 3 is transfer station attendant, and 4 is recreation coordinator. I think those 4 are pretty safe to say they don't need self-evaluations. 5, we start to get into a grouping that might be a little mixed because it includes the assistant treasurer collector, a backup operator, and part-time operator laborers for highway. They don't have any part-time operators right now, but that group makes up grade 5. When you move into 6, that's when you now get to Jess's position, the assistant town clerk, the community development administrator, and full-time operator laborers in the highway department. So here's where you are moving into what you might classify as more professional, or their bucket of hours is greater. Except for that,
Yeah.
this is town clerk, but since it's only
Yeah.
5, but
Well, what
So
if
I
it
don't
were
know if you
grade
want to
5 and above? Knowing that grade 5 actually isn't very well populated at the moment, but it's got like assistant treasurer, maybe, I mean, that I see that's getting on the professional line there. They
Yeah.
need, so if we said grade 5 and above, does a self-evaluation and a supervisor evaluation, and grades 1 through 4, we won't require the self-evaluation. And then maybe kind of a modified supervisor evaluation. And
And then we make the meeting an
yeah,
optional based on either request or deficiency.
okay, well,
Is that the meeting with the kind of the third party, or is that the meeting between the supervisor and the employee? Because is the supervisor still going to meet with the employee and discuss the review, just not with the third party?
I think the meeting, there doesn't have to be a meeting at all.
Okay.
My suggestion would be the meeting would only happen if it's requested, but it would include a third party, just because third parties are recommended practice, especially when it comes to HR. So the meeting of the 3, or any meeting, would only be would be optional and only dependent on the employee requesting it or the supervisor finding a deficiency.
yeah. So when an employee gets their evaluation, and there would be something at the bottom that says if you want, you can request a meeting with your supervisor, and the town administrator. For most people, that would be it, right?
Yeah.
But it's not required. If you're happy with your evaluation, you don't have to have a meeting.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
Lost her.
So I mean, that will be a little change to the form. I do like the idea that for many people, this could just be, let's do an evaluation party from 11 to 12. And
Yeah.
everybody comes, they do their self-evaluations if they have to do one. Maybe their supervisor's already done it and they can do an exchange at that point. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that, I mean, I would leave that to department heads. I wouldn't enforce something like that. But it doesn't have to be a particularly time-consuming thing.
Mhm.
And
Well, and so I've been like on the second page of this document, I started looking at some platforms that we could possibly consider. And with all of these, what's good about them is the employee and the supervisor can go in and fill out their
uh-huh,
evaluation, there we go, fill out their evaluation, and then immediately, once both parties have finished, if it is one where we require both parties are finished, you immediately see the results. So, or the employee, once they've submitted theirs, they can wait for their supervisor, and then they'll get a notification that your supervisor has completed it. Now you can log in and see, and that's when we could trigger the request. Supervisor can see the evaluation, how many people are behind, remind them to do it. It just creates an easy way to manage it. And that's where we can more easily manage the type of questions that are included, as well as triggering if an employee has to do their own or just their supervisor. It would make it a little bit easier. I did find one platform that's completely free. And there's another one where it's unfortunately $2 per month per person, which means a single employee would cost $24 a year just to have an evaluation platform, and we have to do it for everybody, which even at $2, it sounds low. But it's not
per person per month.
compounded.
That's gonna add up. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
one.
So my thought was, if the personnel committee is okay with it, I would at least create a framework within this free platform, SurveyMars. One of the things that I'm thinking we do is we do not include employee or supervisor names within these platforms, just to keep it their names private. And we associate an employee number, and we only have access to the employee numbers because it's in our payroll system. So we have employee numbers designated for every employee. We would just use that as the identifier in here. That way, everything is kept anonymous in case there was some problem with data. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
And you have the ability to edit the templates, so you can word
It's
the question.
completely customizable. Every platform allows you to customize it.
Yeah.
It allows you to customize the process flow. They're all pretty much the same. When I was looking through them all. But yeah, you can customize the questions, the flow, the sign-off timing. But they all generate a report at the end, which is great because then that report can go into their personnel record like we've done. But it doesn't require like Pete having to go and take multiple submittals and combine them into a single sheet. And not that, like, I didn't mind that, but just trying to figure out like ways to where we can streamline.
Exactly. I mean, as much as I love your paper shuffling skills, I would really like your brain working on, things that will actually, I don't know, help the town out a little bit even more. Yeah.
But yeah, if the committee is okay with it, I can at least set something up, and then our next meeting, I can show you what that would look like. And I could create a fake employee and a fake supervisor and show you what the experience is like for both.
Okay.
And for the time being, I'll use our existing questions, but obviously we can modify that in the future.
Yeah. Does that seem reasonable too, Susan and Jim?
Yeah, no, I like that a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. I think the questions themselves, I mean, I don't know if everybody has a copy of the current review to look at the wording of the questions.
Oh, somewhere on my computer. I do.
Yeah, I'm in the same
But they were
boat.
definitely aimed towards a professional who's like climbing a ladder and getting experience and, growing their skills. And it was oriented towards that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know JP had some concerns with the fire department because a lot of the questions, interpersonal skills, things like that, they're not working necessarily with the public. They're responding on call to a fire or an alarm or something like that. So for them to be evaluated on how they interact with the public when they don't interact with the public, is it a fair question for them?
Right.
That type of thing. Yeah.
And it might be that when he goes through and does an evaluation, he says NA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's we
Not
had discussed some
applicable.
things that don't apply. Yeah.
Yeah, but like the deputy definitely still interacts. So there are some within his department that still
Yeah.
interact with public. So
Yeah, his
yeah, I think-
officers. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we can easily, I wouldn't get into the weeds of the questions right now
Yeah. No.
because that we can easily modify.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let's get the platform first, and
yeah, and
Right.
make sure that the flow, we really feel like the flow is going to optimize it for us and for the staff. That the biggest thing is, you know, I did have to harass. And nobody, not naming anybody here in the meeting. But you know, there were certain supervisors or employees that did them pretty quickly, and I think it's just based on their nature. And others who
Yeah.
put it off. And so I just want to make sure that whatever we do, it's not interpreted by them as an onerous task. We definitely want people to do this because it helps them understand what they're doing well and what they're not doing well, but we also don't want them to like look down on it.
Yeah,
and it's still contingent. You know, any step increase, in addition to the finance committee, the select board, and everybody agreeing to do that, it's still, you know, the evaluation is still kind of hinging, or the step system is kind of
but
hinging
there
on.
is some consequences. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some consequences for it. So it's I mean, it has to be meaningful in that
Mhm.
sense. That's kind of the bargain we made with the finance committee to have the step system, but have evaluations.
Okay, well, I can work on that for the next meeting.
Okay,
Thank you.
and what is our timeline for our next meeting?
We don't have one set. It's,
Oh, we may have to do that then by email.
yeah, we might
Yeah.
have to do it by email because we'll have to wait for finance committee to appoint their next person. And then we can figure out when,
Oh, yeah.
because
Did
Jerry
somebody-
stepped off.
Oh,
Yeah,
Jerry.
Jerry stepped off the personnel, yeah. Well, they're meeting tonight, so
Yeah.
could be
He
as
stepped-
soon as tonight.
Did he step off the finance committee and personnel committee?
No,
No, just
he's
finance,
still on
just
finance.
personnel, I mean.
Oh, okay.
The guy with skills that are in demand.
Okay, well, I will email everybody once the new person is selected and we'll figure out when we will meet next.
Okay,
Sounds good.
okay, all right, then I would hear a motion.
Motion.
move
Oh,
we
sorry,
adjourn.
but maybe there's something else on it. Oh, I better check the agenda again. All right. Agenda, any items not anticipated? Okay, all right, now I would entertain a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor by roll call, Susan,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Joyce, aye. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
See some of you later tonight.
Bye.
Bye-bye.